At my sister's wedding, the groom's mother slipped me a note instead of a blessing. It said, "You're the only one here who knows where the money is buried. Smile." I smiled. Of course I did. In our family, smiling is a survival instinct, the way fish learn currents long before they learn distance. The ballroom of the Oberoi in Delhi glittered with inherited confidence crystal chandeliers, orchids flown in from Thailand, politicians pretending not to recognize industrialists, pretending not to bribe them. The band was playing a Safan ghazal, tuned for people who prefer their nostalgia curated and denatured. And beneath all of it, like a second bass line only some of us could hear, ran the question everyone here had come to avoid asking out loud: who, exactly, was about to win? I'm not the protagonist type. I'm the middle sibling who learned early that silence could be sharpened. I'm the one who studied law not to practice it, who left India for 5 years and returned because absence too is a kind of leverage. If this were Reddit, I'd start with a disclaimer. Throwaway because half my relatives read this site. Names changed, some details obscured. But the truth is, names don't matter here. Roles do. Let me rewind. 3 months earlier, my father died twice. The first time was on the golf course. A respectable heart attack between the 12th and 13th holes at DLF. The kind of death people nodded at approvingly, as if he'd chosen it for the optics. The second time was when the will was read. That death was slower, more creative. It killed the man I thought I knew and replaced him with a puzzle designed by someone who never liked loose ends. My father, Raghav Malhotra, built a logistics empire by knowing where everything was, and when it would move. Ports, warehouses, paperwork. He liked to say he sold certainty to people who could afford chaos. He also liked control, and he believed family was the most volatile asset class of all. The will left the company to a trust. Boring, sensible. The kind of thing business magazines praise posthumously. The twist was a clause nobody noticed until our lawyer, who had known my father long enough to flinch before delivering bad news, cleared his throat. A secondary letter, sealed separately, to be delivered to the child most capable of understanding consequence. That was me. Not because I'm brilliant, because I'm predictable. My father always said predictability was underrated. It let people underestimate you cleanly. The letter said there was a discretionary fund off books, legally ambiguous, ethically radioactive, that had been used for stabilization. It named no amount. It named no account. It said only this: the fund must be returned to the family by consensus. If not, it will be returned to the state by scandal. Then it listed 4 people: my mother, my sister, my brother-in-law, and me. Consensus. In this family. I laughed once, alone in my car, hands still shaking on the steering wheel. It came out brittle and wrong. High society in India isn't about money. It's about memory. Everyone remembers who helped whom during which emergency, whose daughter married whose son after which raid, who sat quietly during which investigation, and who spoke too loudly afterward. Favors don't expire, they ferment. They grow teeth. My mother, Nandini, believes she is a moral center. She has built an identity around philanthropy that requires a certain kind of blindness, selective, sincere, and extremely expensive. My sister Aisha is a brand manager who married into steel. She speaks in narratives and believes optics are reality if managed aggressively enough. Her husband Kunal is pleasant in the way men are when they have never been denied anything that mattered, only delayed. I am the family's auditor. The one who asks for receipts nobody wants to find. The one who notices when stories don't add up because I've never needed them to. We met weekly in my father's old study, its walls still smelling faintly of cigar and cedar. Each week followed the same choreography. My mother would insist the fund was for emergencies, that my father had only ever done what everyone did, and that digging now would only harm the good his name could still do. Aisha would argue for quiet redistribution scholarships, hospitals, a legacy pivot with a strong press strategy. She said words like reframing and closure. She avoided numbers. Kuno would say nothing until the end. Then he suggested a solution that protected his interests while sounding altruistic. He was very good at that. He'd had practice, and I would listen. Because here's the thing, my father didn't trust consensus. He trusted incentives. I knew the fund wasn't buried in a bank. He hated banks. He loved complexity. The money was likely split across instruments designed to look like operational friction overlapping entities, timed liabilities, investments that appeared boring until they weren't. I knew where to look. I just didn't tell them. I told myself I was buying time. That's what I wrote in my notes anyway. Buying time. Enter Mrs. Batra. At first she was just a name that appeared too often in the margins of things. Then she became a lunch invitation. She had once chaired a regulator, then quietly consulted for companies that benefited from knowing where the regulatory blind spots were. She collected people like others collected art by provenance, not sentiment. She invited me to Indian accent. She ordered for both of us without asking. She spoke about my father with the kind of respect that implies shared context rather than affection. She said he'd been a stabilizing influence. She said she hoped his children would be the same. Then she said lightly, as if asking about dessert, "You know the fund will surface. The question is whether it surfaces as philanthropy or prosecution." I asked her how she knew about it. She smiled. Everyone knows. The mistake is thinking everyone knows the same version. That's when I understood the wedding wasn't just a wedding. It was a deadline. Everyone likes masterminds, so here's where I should reveal a chessboard and say I planned everything. I didn't. What I did have was pattern recognition. Pattern 1. Kuno had been unusually attentive. Calls, dinners, soft concern disguised as brotherhood. He wanted the fund neutralized before his family's IPO roadshow. Volatility spooked investors. Pattern 2. My mother had received a donation pledge from a foundation linked indirectly, politely to Mrs. Batra. A lot of zeros. Conditional zeros. Pattern 3. Aisha had been approached by a journalist she'd known in college, now covering legacy ethics. Casual messages. Curious timing. Pattern 4. Me. I had been followed twice. Sloppily, enough to be noticed. Enough to signal interest without threat, so I made a move. I told each of them a different truth. To my mother, I said the fund was mostly gone, spent on disaster relief after a cyclone, and that reopening it would only taint her causes. To Aisha, I said it was intact and could be turned into the most impressive philanthropic pivot Delhi had seen in a decade. To Kunal, I said there were tax implications that could delay any resolution past the IPO window, especially if handled clumsily. All of those statements were true, just not all at once. Then I leaked a rumor, not the fund, but a process. I let it be known carefully that the trust's auditors were considering a material review. I let people imagine timelines, headlines, subpoenas. High society panics beautifully, quietly, through intermediaries. The wedding invitation arrived embossed and heavy, a kind of summons disguised as celebration. It was the convergence point. If the fund didn't resolve itself, it would resolve us. Back to the ballroom. When Mrs. Batra handed me the note, I understood it wasn't a threat. It was an acknowledgement. She knew I was the fulcrum. She was asking which way I would lean. I folded the note and slipped it into my clutch. I went to the bar and ordered water. I watched my mother accept congratulations with the relief of someone who believes righteousness is contagious. I watched Aisha laugh too loudly, scanning the room for someone specific. I watched Kunal shake hands with a man whose company had been fined last quarter by an agency Mrs. Batra once ran. Then I did the thing my father would have hated most. I told the truth. I asked the MC for the mic. If you've never spoken into a microphone at an Indian wedding, understand this. It's a throne. People will listen to you say anything, because the alternative is silence, and silence is awkward. I said I wanted to honor my father's memory. I said he believed in systems. I said he believed families were systems that failed when incentives were misaligned. I said there had been a fund. I said it existed to smooth risks that shouldn't have existed. I said it would be returned. I did not say how much. I did not say to whom. I said, it will be returned by consensus, and consensus has been reached. My mother looked at me shocked. Aisha's smile froze. Kunal's eyes narrowed, calculating. I said the fund would be split into 3 public endowments, overseen by independent boards, with transparent reporting. I said the first tranche would be transferred within 48 hours. I said the documentation would be made available to regulators proactively. I said my father would have approved. That was a lie, it didn't matter. Then I stepped down. Here's the part that makes Reddit skeptical. It worked. Not because people became good. Because people became safe. Mrs. Batra nodded once. The man Kunal had shaken hands with slipped away. The journalist my sister knew put her phone down. Later, in a quiet corridor, my mother hissed at me. How could you do this without consulting us? I did consult you, I said gently. You just didn't know it, Aisha cried, not because of the money. Because she realized she had been outplayed by someone she'd underestimated since childhood. Kunal cornered me near the valet. You think this protects us? I think, I said, it ends the game. He laughed. Games don't end. They change. He wasn't wrong. 2 days later, the transfers went through. The amounts were impressive, not obscene. Calibrated. Enough to satisfy the narrative without inviting forensic curiosity. A week later, regulators praised our voluntary compliance. A month later, my mother's foundation announced a partnership. A quarter later, Kunal's IPO priced well. Consensus achieved, except for one thing. The fund had never been whole. Years earlier, my father had siphoned part of it into something he called personal insurance. A quiet network of micro-investments designed to pay out if the system turned on him. He'd never activated it. He died before he needed to. I found it while reconciling something I wasn't supposed to look at. I closed the file. I did not mention it. It sits there still, compounding quietly, a reminder that even when you tell the truth, you can choose which truth. So why am I telling you this? Because last night, I received another note. Different hand. Same linen. It said, you ended one game. Are you ready to start another? High society is a series of closed rooms. Doors open if you learn which knock to use. My father taught me that certainty is a product. I've learned something else. Consensus isn't agreement. It's exhaustion. And when everyone is tired enough, the quietest person in the room gets to decide what happens next. Final stats.